Can you see it? Can you smell it? I think it's Melbourne Musos out there.
You're bleeding, man. I ain't got time to bleed.
Payback time.
Payback time.
Hello! My name is Quinlan. Welcome to Payback Time. This is Melbourne Musos. And what I'd like to talk about tonight, it's Payback Time. Oh, get back to the chopper. Hey, my name is Quinlan, as I said, and this is Melbourne Musos Live, and get back to the chopper. I'd like to talk about soundtracks tonight. Oh, I love soundtracks. I also love Foley. I love Foley. You know, the coconuts for the horses. Can we come and have a look? No. Holy Grail. Sorry. The coconuts. Okay, I don't know if it's a European swallow or an African swallow. Oi! But what does soundtracks have to do with drums? A lot, pray tell. Let me get down to it. So what happens is when you're dealing with any kind of atmospheric business, what you can do is feed that into your drumming somehow. Being melodic, creating a theme, lots of different things, and lots of different bands do it. If I mention Led Zeppelin, right? Whole Lotta Love, okay? That middle section, the psychedelic section, that is called music concrete, where what you do is you take little samples from here and little samples from there and put it all together into what would be called a collage, you see. So if it's good for Led Zeppelin, it's good for us. So what goes on is this. I'm going to give you a little bit of a definition of soundtrack and soundtrack techniques and all that. But first of all, I'd like to sort of just introduce a couple of generic things, okay, about movie soundtracks and the way that music fills up a film, you know, sort of thing. The most iconic one is Jaws, right? Dum 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 dum. You know, heep heep. You know. Here I am swimming, lovely, lovely in the nude. Boom, 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 boom. Ooh, you know what's going to happen, you see. The other one is Psycho. Like that, you see. Wonderful stuff. Now, when you're actually dealing with certain things, there's certain kinds of things that you can do, you see. Now, what happens is, because this is ostensibly a drum tip show, but with lots of extras as well, what I'd like to talk about is how this kind of stuff can influence your own playing, you see. Now what happens is sometimes such a simple thing can mean a lot, do you see. Now, as you could see when I started off, and because I got the triggers in, and today I've got tremolo strings to E mixolydian, which is usually a happy thing, but not today. Now, the other thing I've got is a set of multi-sticks. They're often known as swizzle sticks because what you have is a mallet on one end and sticks on the other. So you might be doing this in space. No one can hear you drum. See? Oh, fantastic stuff. Now, when you're doing things like that, you don't want to be able to like have mallets playing and then have to put them down and then get the sticks and go. You can get yourself a set of multi-sticks like this. I've got a couple of different types. These are the heavy ones that are my preference. But I've got a few of them. This one's seen better days. But you can have light ones. I've colour-coded them with just a piece of tape. These are the green ones. And all sorts of things. I broke the other ones, the red ones, a few years ago. Ooh. But there you go. And then what happens is you've got all your different implements, you see. Implements. Oh, I love my implements. Anyway. Now to do that, let's get into the drumming business. You need to have a nice, even, single-stroke roll if we're going to do it this way. Get it? So on. And when you're getting into any kind of military thing, of course.
Get to the chopper!
What happened? Predator. Arnie! Okay. So what happens is whenever you're getting any kind of militaristic kind of thing, you can almost guarantee a snare drum. Funnily enough, the influence of this, what I'm doing there, funnily enough, comes from the soundtrack of The Untouchables, okay, with Ennio Morricone. And, that, although it's done with brushes, funnily enough, you can hear it. Like that. Love that soundtrack. Fantastic. And what it is that you need a good, even, single-stroke roll. And then the wherewithal to, in this particular case, I'm using my double pedal, to actually get the like. Let's do another one.
You're hit. You're bleeding, man. I ain't got time to bleed. You're hit. You're bleeding, man. I ain't got time to bleed. You're hit. You're bleeding, man. I ain't got time to bleed.
I ain't got time to bleed.
You're bleeding, man. I ain't got time to bleed. You're hit. You're bleeding, man. I ain't got time to bleed. You're hit. You're bleeding, man. I ain't got time to bleed.
I ain't got time to bleed.
I ain't got time to bleed.
Jesse Ventura. I ain't got time to bleed. Chewing tobacco. If you've go and watch it. It's on telly the other night. I thought, I haven't seen this in years. I remember seeing it at the cinemas. I thought it was a fantastic film for what it was. 80s action adventure, fantastic, and all that. But then also it was on telly, and I just sat back and watched it. I didn't mind the commercial breaks as I made a cup of tea, and I come back, and it's Jesse Ventura. It's payback time.
Payback time.
Oh well. I get amused by anything these days. So, rudiments. So on, you see. And what goes on is that all of a sudden you've got to get your chops up, mate. Chops, chops, chops. And it doesn't just mean slogging it out on a practice pad. I love my practice pad. Get melodic. Try single stroke rolls, just like that. So on. Let me talk about it a little bit here. Okay, here we go. Oh, there we go. A soundtrack is a recorded audio signal accompanying and synchronized to the images of a book, drama, motion picture, radio program, television program, or video game. Colloquially, a commercially released soundtrack album of music as featured in the soundtrack of a film, video, or television presentation like this one, or the physical area of the film that contains the synchronized recorded sound. There's a picture here which I'll put up here. Okay. In movie industry terminology usage, a soundtrack is an audio recording created or used in film production or post-production. Initially, the dialogue, sound effects, and music in the film each has its own separate track. And these are mixed together to make what is called the composite track, which is heard in the film. A dubbing track is often later created when films are dubbed into another language. Aha! This is also known as an M&E, music and effects track. M&E tracks contain all sound elements minus dialogue, which is then supplied by the foreign distributor in the native language of its territory. Capiche? Fantastic. There it is there. Now, there's a couple of different types. There's, of course, film and television soundtracks. What you can do, you can actually do it to a book. Now, with my second show, Impromptu TV, I'll come back to that in just 1 second. What I do a lot of, and I say it very often, so bear with me, regular listener, audience of the show. And what happens is if I do this now on a Friday, chances are you'll hear it on Sunday when I do my, I call it continuum, because I do the more performance-based set without explaining it, I just do it. And thank you for watching. I get surprised about the numbers sometimes. The audience must bring a few mates. I don't know. Thank you, audience. And what happens, is that that ends up being a kind of a soundtrack for what's going to come up on Impromptu TV. Lately I've been doing Drumbalina, Drumbalina, tiny little thing. Thumbelina dance, Drumbalina sing. 5 foot 5 inches tall, or size of my thumb, something like that. It's a long thumb, it's 5 inches. I'll do that again. Tonic note, not the flat 7 to finish. So what happens there is that then it ends up being something. And sometimes, you know, as I said, if you're going to get into...
Get to the chopper!
that kind of thing there. Now if I take the snares off, I could get a little bit melodic, you see. There it is. I was actually saying to one of my students just last night, who remembers the name Michel Legrand, the French composer, movie composer from the 60s and 70s. And there was a bit of a doco on one of the channels way back when, I'm talking then. And it just influenced me so much. He went, "Oh, the orchestra is beautiful," mwah, like this. And he turned around, "Everybody, play the C." And the whole orchestra played C. And it was just like, oh, fantastic. So what happens is when you're getting into orchestration, of which I did a couple of years there, with one Peter Pierce at the time, wonderful teacher. Back in the day, back in Grail at Troy Music when we were teaching there together. And I just went off for orchestration lessons, and it was fantastic. I was just fascinated by it. And the difference between, like the typical Jaws, boom, 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 boom. So you could have, not exactly, they're not the notes, but as an example. But, you know, not half as dramatic, really. It's more like, oh, swimming, you see. So there's a thing called juxtaposition. And where you've got the lovely, like... And you start to juxtaposition the deeper notes, if you like, to the so on it goes. Now what starts to happen is you start to synchronize things, and I'll go back to a little bit of reading. And what happens here is I've got this little second thing here, the psychology of musical soundtracks. In the late 1980s, cognitive psychology and psychology of music started an investigation on the impact that the soundtrack exerts on the interpretation of audiovisual stimuli. Oh, I just swallowed a dictionary. There you go. Canadian psychologist Annabelle J. Cohen is one of the first scholars who systematically studied the relationship between music and moving image within the interpretation process of brief animated videos. There you are. And it keeps on going down. Furthermore, eye tracking and pupillometry studies, I hope I got that right, found that film music is able to influence gaze direction, like that, and pupil dilation, depending on its emotional valence and semantic information conveyed. Recently new experiments show that film music can alter time perception while watching movies. In particular, soundtracks deemed as activating and arousing lead to time overestimation as opposed to more relaxing or sad music. That's really quite interesting. If you take something like a real action film, like Hats Off to Predator, you could do a Bond film, which is usually 2.5 hours on the way to 3. And you go, wow, and all that. And then you go and see another film, and you start looking at your watch halfway through, and then you know what happens. And it depends, you know. And it's very funny that they actually now do studies on the soundtrack and what it can do, you know, as far as creating movement within the film, you see. And that's what goes on. Now I'm going to change up a little bit with the time I've got left. I'm going to go across to Foley. Now, I mentioned coconuts before. We are on the search for the Holy Grail. Well, I don't know. We already have one. We come up and have a look. No, you look like English types. Anyway, I won't shoot that. But what it is Foley is coconuts for the horse, you know, that kind of thing. Who's been up to Warner Brothers World up in the Gold Coast and all that? And there's the Foley room where they actually get the kids to run through, and there's a tiny little door with a microphone, and when it gets hit, it goes like that, and there's a little patch of gravel and the microphone, you know, sort of thing. And then, you know, like I've got it on my Final Cut Pro program, you know, a whole list of them. I love it. I love putting it together. And things like a horse winning, I am Frau Blucher, like that. That was meant to be a horse winning, not a witch's thing. But anyway, what goes on? What starts to happen is that you start to do your Foley, and then that leads into a whole other thing. Now, at the top of the show, I mentioned if it's good for Led Zeppelin, it's good for us. The middle section of Whole Lotta Love is wonderful, you know. And the one thing, what is the thing that binds it all together? Johnny Bonham's hi-hat. You know, and it just keeps on going. And away you go. So you might have, that's why, one of the reasons why I do a lot of splash hatting. Anyway, there you go. Now, imagine if I didn't have that. There's a continuity. There's the pulse, if you will. Imagine if I just did this.
I ain't got time to bleed.
I don't know. It doesn't have as much gravitas. Gravitas, I tells you. So what starts to happen is you start doing other things, you see. And what often happens is that these kinds of... this kind of Foley, if you will, the musique concrète. There's one that is really quite interesting and topical now, but it was done in the 80s. And our beloved Frank Zappa, hopefully still beloved, and that kind of thing. But what happens is one of his solo albums, Lumpy Gravy, and it was just musique concrète all the way through with a few little things in between. Eric Clapton was on the album, not to play guitar, just talking. All sorts of things. And what started to happen is that he kept that going. He loved all that bit, like taking bits of tape. And that goes back to the Beatles, different, I buried Paul, and all the backwards tapes and all that. Ooh, devil, 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 sort of thing. But no, it's musique concrète. Goes all the way back to Edgard Varése and his poem Electronique. And it keeps on going. But in the 80s, which is a little bit topical now, Frank Zappa stood up and really made a case against censorship. And he had a track on Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Prevention, and it was called Porn Wars. And it was basically censoring tracks and stuff. Now, in the day, it was like, well, it's, if someone's saying naughty words, okay, fine, beep, beep, and all that stuff. But there's a little bit more to it now, because with censorship right here and right now, it's quite insidious, and I don't want to make it a kind of an editorial, but it's prescient, it's right of now, and he did porn wars. And what he did was he got the senators' speeches, sped them up, slowed them down, right to left, and created this collage, which is really quite amazing, to look at. And one of the things I love is of that kind of a soundtracking thing is that when you're actually doing that with Foley and all that, you can really create a real centre, as far as that, when the composer goes off. We all know John Williams, Star Wars, that kind of thing. James Bond, all the classic Jaws I've already mentioned. Dun, 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 dun. You just know the shark's coming, and we just know the soundtrack. One of the great things about Jaws is that the big chase with the yellow barrels and they're running around doing all that sort of stuff. That piece of music is so influenced by one of my favourite composers, Dmitri Shostakovich. It was written by John Williams, but it was like, wow, that kind of business. And one of the things about Dmitri Shostakovich is that when he wasn't doing his symphonies and trying to not get executed by Stalin and getting disappeared in the bad old days, in the gulags, Shostakovich wrote many movie soundtracks as well, and you could tell with his music it was so atmospheric. It's amazing. You just got to check it out. He was the heavy metal dude. He's the heavy metal dude of classical music. Go check him out. It's quite amazing. Followed closely by Igor Stravinsky, and there you go. Wonderful stuff. I better get a wriggle on here. And so to finish off, take some time to watch your favourite movie again, but concentrate on the music.
Get to the chopper! Get to the chopper! Get to the chopper! Get to the chopper!
You hit, you bleed back to the chopper! You hit, you bleed back to the chopper!
It's payback time!
You bleed back.
Payback time!
You hit, you bleed back.
Payback time! It's payback time! It's payback time! It's payback time!
Ain't got time to bleed!
It's payback time! 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 It's payback time!
It's payback time! Oh!
It's payback time.
Wow.
It's payback time.
Oh!
It's payback time.
I gotta get me some chewing tobacco.
It's payback time.
But
It's payback time.
I'd rather have a nice glass of...
Payback.